The lock on the $10 million mansion door clicked shut with the finality of a gavel. Damien Vassar stood on the marble steps, adjusting his $5,000 Italian suit, as his wife Emily stood shivering on the gravel driveway, holding nothing but her car keys. "The house is mine, Emily. The company is mine. You're left with what you came with, nothing." He spat the words, turning to wrap his arm around a younger woman in the doorway. He was right. He did own the house. He owned every custom-built wall, every imported chandelier. But he had forgotten to check one crucial detail. He owned the house, but he had never, ever owned the land. The rain began as a cold, stinging mist, an afterthought to the humiliation. Emily Hayes Vassar hadn't even processed the sound of the deadbolt. She was still reeling from the words, "Sienna is moving in. You are moving out." It had happened with the speed of a car crash. She had been at a charity luncheon for the City Restoration Fund, a passion project she'd poured thousands of hours into. She'd come home, her heels clicking on the imported Italian marble of the grand foyer, calling Damien's name. She was excited to tell him they had secured the grant for the downtown library. He wasn't in his study. He wasn't in the gym. He was in the master bedroom, their bedroom, and he was not alone. Sienna Stone, a woman Emily recognized from countless vapid social media posts, was preening in front of Emily's antique vanity mirror, applying Emily's Chanel lipstick. "Oh, good," Sienna had said, her voice a sickly sweet syrup. "She's here. Now we can get this over with." Damien, emerging from the master bath wearing only a towel, had the audacity to look annoyed. Not ashamed, not guilty. Annoyed, as if Emily had interrupted an important business meeting. "Emily, perfect timing," he'd said, his voice the one he used for hostile takeovers. "Sienna and I were just finalizing things. It's over. We're done." "Done?" Emily's voice was a whisper. The grant, the library, the last 10 years of her life evaporated. "Damien, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about this." He gestured between himself and Sienna, who was now wrapping herself in Emily's silk robe. "This is real. What we had," he scoffed, "was a business arrangement. And frankly, you've become a bad investment." The argument had been a blur of his cruelty. He called her stale, uninspired, and a glorified decoration. He accused her of holding him back, of being a passionless weight on his ambition. Every word was a calculated strike designed to shatter the quiet, steady woman he had married. Emily had been silent, a trait Damien had always mistaken for weakness. Her silence was not weakness. It was shock turning rapidly into a cold, crystallizing rage. "Get your things," he'd snapped, tossing a small, empty duffel bag at her feet. "Just the essentials. My lawyers will send a check for whatever the prenup dictates, which, if I recall, is basically nothing." Ah, the prenup. Damien had been so proud of it. Drafted by his cutthroat team at Vassar Capital, it was designed to protect his assets. He, the self-made tech mogul, couldn't risk his fortune on a charity case wife, as he'd once joked to his friends. Emily hadn't fought him on it. Her own family lawyers had glanced at it, smiled faintly, and advised her to sign. "It's perfectly fine, dear," her father had said, now that nothing was becoming very real. "I'm not leaving," Emily had stated, her voice trembling, but firm. "Oh, you are." Damien laughed. He grabbed her by the arm, his grip bruising. He was stronger than he looked, fueled by arrogance and new lust. He dragged her down the winding staircase, past the priceless art she had curated, past the library she had stocked. Sienna followed, filming parts of it on her phone, a triumphant smirk on her face. "Damien, stop! This is my home." "No, this is my home," he roared, shoving her toward the door. "I built this. I paid for this. Every brick, every window is mine. You are just a guest who overstayed her welcome." He'd thrown open the massive carved oak doors. The mist was now a driving, icy rain. "Your car is in the driveway. The Bentley is mine. The Range Rover is mine. You can keep the pathetic little hybrid you insisted on driving." He'd reached into her coat pocket, fished out her wallet, removed his black credit card, and tossed the wallet onto the gravel beside her. "Now get out!" Sienna, standing in the doorway, shivered dramatically. "Hurry up, baby. You're letting the cold in. Let's go open that bottle of 2005 Dom Perignon. We have something to celebrate." Damien had looked back at Emily, a final, chilling assessment. "You know, I thought you were smart, but you were just quiet. Turns out you were just empty." He threw her small duffel bag containing only her laptop and a change of clothes he'd deemed frumpy enough to be hers onto the wet gravel. And then the click of the deadbolt. Emily stood there for a full minute, the rain soaking her silk blouse, plastering her hair to her face. The gravel cut into her knees as she knelt to retrieve her bag. She looked up at the magnificent structure. The Vassar Estate, the press called it. A sprawling monument of glass and steel perched on the most exclusive crest in Hawkes Ridge. Damien was right. He did own the house. He had the receipts to prove it. She got into her pathetic hybrid. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the keys twice. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she took a deep, shuddering breath and pulled out her phone. She didn't call her mother. She didn't call her friends. She scrolled to a number saved under M. Thorne. "Marcus," she said, her voice raspy. "It's Emily. He's done it." There was a pause on the other end, then a deep, calm voice. "The morals clause, then. Is the cohabitation confirmed?" "She's in my bathrobe, Marcus," Emily said, the cold finally seeping into her voice. "She's drinking my champagne in his house." "A fatal mistake," Marcus Thorne replied, a hint of grim satisfaction in his tone. "Not his house, Mrs. Vassar. And that is the problem. Where are you?" "I'm on the curb." "Good. Go to the penthouse at the Hayes Tower. Use your maiden name. Order room service. Get some sleep. I will initiate the protocol at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Damien Vassar has just made the most expensive mistake of his life. He thinks he owns it, Marcus." "We know, my dear," the lawyer said. "He owns the circus, but he forgot to ask who owns the land." Damien Vassar woke to the smell of expensive coffee and the blinding sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his master bedroom. Sienna was draped across his chest, her phone already in her hand, scrolling through Instagram comments. "Babe," she mumbled, "what should I caption this morning view from my new castle?" Damien smiled, feeling a surge of pure, unadulterated power. This was his. He had earned it. He had shed his dead weight. Emily was probably crying in a 200-a-night Marriott, wondering how it all went wrong. "Caption it, the King's View," he said, kissing Sienna's bare shoulder. "And make sure you tag the location." He got up, stretched, and walked to the window overlooking the 20-acre estate. The grounds were immaculate. The infinity pool seemed to spill over into the city skyline below. His. All his. He padded downstairs to his state-of-the-art office to start his day. He had a few things to clean up. First, severing the financial ties. He logged into his private banking portal. He had several joint accounts with Emily, mostly for household expenses. He'd liquidate them, move the funds to his personal account. He clicked on the Vassar-Hayes joint account. Balance. Trawls, he frowned. That was odd. There was at least 150,000 in that account. He checked the transfer history. A single-wire transfer executed at 8:55 a.m., 5 minutes ago. All funds moved to a Hayes Family Trust account. That conniving, he growled. She'd woken up early to be petty. Fine. It was a drop in the ocean. He tried the next account, the brokerage account. It held some Play stocks. She liked green energy, sustainable textiles. Account frozen. He tried to log into the household management system to change the gate codes. Access denied. Administrator credentials invalid. A cold prickle of annoyance ran down his spine. This was more than petty. This was organized. He scoffed. She probably had some small-time divorce lawyer trying to make a statement. He'd crush them. He called his own lawyer, Stanley Croft. Stanley, she's out. Start the divorce. I want it fast. I want it clean. And I want her buried under the prenup. Right, Damien, Stanley said, sounding eager. I'll file the standard papers, but there's a small problem. What problem? I just got a notification. A hold has been placed on the Hawks Ridge property by a third party. Not a lien, exactly. A leasehold compliance review. Damien was silent. A what? What third party? Thorne Finch and Associates, Stanley said. Damien's blood ran cold. Thorne Finch and Associates wasn't some small-time divorce firm. They were the oldest, most powerful real estate and trust law firm in the state. They represented old money. The kind of money that didn't bother with Forbes lists because they owned the paper mills Forbes was printed on. Why are they involved? Damien demanded. That's what I'm trying to figure out. They're not representing Emily Vassar. They're representing the Hawks Ridge Land Holding Corporation. Damien laughed, a harsh barking sound. That's just the HOA, Stanley. They manage the landscaping. Send them a check. I don't think it's the HOA, Damien. The filing is aggressive. It's citing a default. Meanwhile, Emily was not in a Marriott. She was 40 floors above the city in the private unlisted penthouse of the Hayes Tower, a building her great-grandfather had built. The space was the opposite of the cold glass and steel mansion. It was warm, filled with books, rich mahogany, and worn, priceless Persian rugs. She was showered, dressed in a simple cashmere sweater and slacks, and sipping tea with Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a man in his late 60s, impeccably dressed with the calm demeanor of a man who had never lost an argument. He's discovering the accounts now, Marcus said, looking at his pocket watch. The joint accounts were easy. The household systems were tied to a management company owned by the trust, so we simply revoked his user privileges. He is as of 9:01 a.m., a guest in his own home. He won't understand, Emily said, looking out the window. He's so focused on the house. Let's review just so you are prepared, Marcus said, pulling a file. Your great-grandfather, Robert Hayes, purchased 5,000 acres of what was then worthless hillside in 1922. The Hayes Land Trust has never sold a single acre. We lease it. The 99-year ground leases. Emily recited a lesson she'd learned since childhood. Precisely. Developers, moguls like Mr. Vassar come in. They build their dream homes. They pay millions for the privilege of building on our land. They own the structure, the improvements, as we call them. but they are, for all intents and purposes, tenants. Marcus tapped the file. Damien Vassar signed a 99-year lease for Lot 117 Hawks Ridge. The annual fee is nominal, a few $1,000s. He thought it was a steal. He never reads the fine print, Emily murmured. He leaves that to his people, and his people clearly missed Clause 34. Marcus said, smiling. The Hayes Morals Clause. It's so archaic, Emily said. Archaic but ironclad. It was your great-grandmother's idea. We will not have scandal on Hayes land. The clause states that the leaseholder must not engage in behavior that could bring disrepute, scandal, or public notoriety to the property. This includes, but is not limited to, publicly documented infidelity, criminal activity, or cohabitation with a non-spouse in a manner of adultery. Sienna Stone, Emily said, is currently, I believe, posting selfies from the master bedroom tagged at Vassar Estate. Marcus's assistant, a sharp young woman named Price, chimed in, holding up a tablet. The post has 15,000 likes. She has captioned it, The King's View. Publicly documented. Perfect, Marcus said. As of 9:00 a.m., we served Mr. Vassar with a notice of default on his lease. He has 30 days to cure the default. Cure it? Emily asked. In this case, that would mean ceasing the adulterous cohabitation, removing Miss Stone and presumably reconciling with his legally wedded wife. You. Emily laughed, a dry, humorless sound. And if he fails to cure the default, Marcus said, his eyes glinting, the Hayes Land Trust has the right to terminate the lease, immediately. And the house. Oh, this is the beautiful part. Clause 34b. Upon termination of the lease, due to default, all improvements on the land, the house, the pool, the art installations, are forfeited. They become the property of the landowner. Us. Emily finally took a sip of her tea. It was hot and it was strong. He's going to fight. He will call it a shakedown. Let him, Marcus said. He's a tech bully. We are a 100-year-old institution. He is bringing a lawsuit to a war. Now on to Phase 2, the Vassar Capital Fund. What about it? Emily asked. You are a silent partner, are you not? Your initial $20 million seed money. He told me it was just a formality for tax purposes, Emily said. He's always said it's his fund. He is the face, yes. But your $20 million, which is now worth over $200 million, is held in a sub-trust. A sub-trust that once again contains a morals clause tied to your marriage. He has just breached his fiduciary duty to you, his primary partner. Emily stared. I thought that money was just gone. Invested. Oh no, Emily, Marcus said, standing up. Your father was a very smart man. He didn't trust Damien any further than he could throw him. You are not just a silent partner. You are the controlling partner. Damien Vassar is about to find out that he doesn't just work in his company. He works for his wife. Damien Vassar was in a state of controlled fury. He was pacing his glass-walled office, barking at his lawyer. What do you mean you can't get a judge to vacate? It's a compliance review. It's harassment. It's Emily. She's bitter. Damien, I'm telling you. Stanley Croft's voice was tinny over the speakerphone. This isn't Emily's signature. It's Marcus Thorne's. This isn't a divorce tactic. This is a real estate dispute. And frankly, they're not wrong about the lease. I've got a copy of it. And, Damien, did you read this Clause 34A, the Morals Clause? That's just boilerplate. It's archaic. It's unenforceable. Damien yelled, slamming his fist on his desk. The desk, a single slab of polished obsidian, didn't shudder. It's not Damien, Stanley said, his voice dropping. Not when the Hayes family is involved. Their entire reputation is built on enforceable contracts. You are publicly cohabitating with Miss Stone, are you not? It's my house. It's their land, Stanley shot back, and they are claiming you are in default. You have 30 days to cure it, which means Sienna has to go. Sienna, who had been lounging on the sofa in his office, sat up. What go where? She's not going anywhere, Damien snapped. This is my house. You tell Marcus Thorne. I'll see him in court. I'll sue him, Emily, and this Hayes Trust for everything they've got. Damien, Stanley said, sighing. You can't. Your prenup with Emily is airtight. It protects your assets from her. But it also has a mutual no-contest clause. You can't sue her for, well, anything. And you definitely don't want to sue the Hayes Trust. Why not? I'm worth billions. They're worth cities, Damien. They don't measure their wealth in dollars, they measure it in square miles. Just hear them out. It's a shakedown. They probably want money. A fine. Pay it. Get them off your back. And maybe be discreet with Sienna for a few weeks. Discreet. Sienna stood up, outraged. He just kicked his wife out for me. I am not discreet. Damien hung up on Stanley. He's an idiot, he muttered. He's weak. I'll get new lawyers. I'll get the best. He looked at Sienna. Baby, he's just stressed. It's nothing. Just some legal nonsense Emily cooked up. I'll handle it. You'd better, Sienna said, pouting. I'm not going to be discreet. I'm supposed to host a brand launch party here next week. For my new Stone's Glow tanner. Damien's phone buzzed. It was his COO, Mark. Damien, thank God. What the hell is going on? Mark sounded frantic. What are you talking about? The fund Vassar Capital, I'm locked out. All the high-level admin controls, they're frozen. I can't execute the trades for the Apex merger. What, that's impossible. I'm the only one with full admin keys. Well, you're not, Mark said. A controlling partner directive just came through. It's Emily. Not Emily Vassar. Emily Hayes. And she's frozen all capital movement. Damien's vision swam. He stumbled to his chair. That can't be right. She's not a partner. She gave me seed money. It was a gift. The documents I'm seeing, Mark said, his voice tight with panic, say it was a $20 million buy-in as a controlling interest partner contingent on a fiduciary morals clause tied to her personal well-being and marital status. Damien, what did you do? Damien was breathing hard. She wouldn't know how. She doesn't know anything about the business. Then her lawyers do, Mark yelled. The market opens in 20 minutes, and our entire portfolio is frozen pending a partner review. The investors, Damien, the investors are calling. They've seen the freeze. They're panicking. You need to fix this. Call her, beg her. Do whatever you have to do. The line went dead. Damien sat in his $1 million office in his $100 million house and felt the first icy cold tendril of real fear. He had built an empire of glass and code, a new money monolith, but he had built it on a foundation of old money stone, and he had just taken a sledgehammer to the foundation. Damien, Sienna's voice was sharp. What's wrong? You look pale. Is it the lawyer? Did he upset you? The fund, Damien whispered. She's frozen the fund. Sienna's perfectly manicured face went from pouting to confusion, and then to a cold, calculating hardness that matched his own. What do you mean, frozen? She's a partner. A controlling partner. Sienna stood up. The silk robe, Emily's robe, suddenly looked cheap on her. A partner. You told me she was nothing. You told me she was a charity case you married. I thought she was, he yelled, lashing out. How was I supposed to know? She signs checks for libraries. She volunteers. She's Emily. Well, Emily is apparently the one who signs your checks. Sienna spat. You told me you were the king. You're not the king. You're just a jester. Get out. Damien said, his voice low. What? Not you, just get out of my office. I need to think. I need to call. I need to fix this. Sienna, for the first time, looked uncertain. The financial security she had just gleefully grabbed was flickering. You are going to fix this, Damien. Right. You're going to call her and tell her to stop. Yes. Damien said, his mind racing. I'll call her. I'll reason with her. She's emotional. She's just hurt. I'll offer her a better settlement. A real one. 10 million. 20 million. She'll sign. She'll have to. He pulled up Emily's contact. He dialed. It went straight to voicemail, not her personal voicemail. You have reached the private line of Emily Hayes. I am not available. For all matters regarding the Hayes Land Trust, please contact Marcus Thorne. For all matters regarding Vassar Capital, please contact the office of the controlling partner. All other inquiries will not be returned. He threw his phone across the room. It shattered against a wall-sized abstract painting. Fine, he seethed to the empty room. You want to play hardball, Emily? You've forgotten who I am. I don't get bullied. I do the bullying. He buzzed his security team. Find my wife. Find out where she is. I don't care how. I want to know where she's sleeping, what she's eating, and who she's talking to, now. While Damien was dismantling his office, Emily was in a different kind of war room. The main conference room at Thorne Finch and Associates was not the sterile glass box environment Damien favored. It was paneled in dark wood, the table a 20-foot-long single piece of mahogany. The walls were lined with leather-bound books that were not for show. They were used. Emily sat at the head of the table. Marcus Thorne was to her right. To her left was a team of specialists. As of 10:00 a.m., a forensic accountant named Peterson was saying, "We have a full freeze on all Vassar Capital assets pending our audit. As the controlling partner, you are well within your rights, Mrs. Vassar. The fiduciary morals clause is explicit. The fund's stability is predicated on the stable marital union of its partners as your father stipulated. The public ejection of one partner by the other constitutes, well, it's a catastrophic breach." He'll say it's my money, Emily said. He'll claim I'm just an investor. He will say that, Marcus cut in. But the law will say otherwise. Your father was brilliant. The money was never yours to gift to him. It was the trust's. The trust invested in him with you as its proxy. Damien was in legal terms the managing director of your investment, and he just tried to fire his boss. He's going to be violent, Emily said, her voice small for a moment. His security team is already making inquiries. Ms. Price, the assistant, said, not looking up from her laptop. They've called 3 fixers to try and locate you. All 3 fixers are on the Hayes Trust retainer. They all reported no leads. Emily blinked. You have fixers on retainer. Marcus smiled, My dear, the Hayes family doesn't just own land. We own relationships. You are in the safest place you could possibly be. He cannot reach you." "Good," Emily said, the steel returning to her voice. "What's next?" "The house." "The 30-day notice is delivered," Marcus said. "He has two options. One, he cures the default. This means Miss Sienna Stone must vacate the premises permanently, and he must cease all scandalous behavior." "He won't do that," Emily said. "His pride won't allow it. He'd rather burn the house down." "Which brings us to option 2, Marcus continued. "He ignores the notice. He files lawsuits. He tries to fight us. In 30 days, on the 10th of next month, his right to cure expires. At 12:01 a.m. on the 11th, the Hayes Trust takes possession of Lot 117 and all improvements thereon. We will have the Sheriff's Department on standby to escort Mr. Vassar and his guest from our property." "He'll never see it coming," Emily murmured. "He's so arrogant. He thinks morals clause is a joke." "The most effective legal tools are the ones people laugh at," Marcus said, "until they're invoked. Now, Emily, the board of the trust needs to know your intention. What is your plan?" "We can, of course, liquidate his position in the fund. It would be messy. But you would be worth in liquid cash several $billion." Emily looked around the table. At the serious, powerful people all waiting for her, the quiet wife, to speak. "I remember," she said slowly, "when Damien first proposed. He took me to Hawk's Ridge. It was just an empty patch of dirt then. He stood there and he said, 'I'm going to build a monument to myself here. Something so big and bright, no one can ever ignore me again.' He was so driven. I thought it was passion. I didn't realize it was just hunger. A void that can't be filled." She paused, then looked Marcus dead in the eye. "He threw me out. He told me I was nothing. He said I was empty. He built his empire on my family's foundation and called it his own. He didn't just break a marriage vow. He committed theft. Of my time, my name, my security." "So the goal is not reconciliation," Marcus stated. "The goal," Emily said, standing up. Her voice, ringing with an authority that surprised even herself, is consequences. "He built a monument to himself. I want it gone." "Emily. Not the land, Marcus. The house. The Vassar estate. He thinks it's his legacy. I want it erased." "Can we do that?" Marcus Thorne looked at his partners. A slow, wolfish grin spread across his face. "Yes, Mrs. Vassar. I believe we can. We can terminate the lease. We can seize the improvement. And then we can file for a demolition permit." "Demolition?" Peterson the accountant gasped. "That house is worth north of $100 million. It's a structure," Emily said, her voice cold as the marble in her old foyer. "It's an improvement on Hayes land, and I find it in bad taste. It brings disrepute. It's an eyesore." "A demolition permit," Marcus mused. "The Hawk's Ridge Architectural Review Board would have to approve it. Which they will. The Hayes Trust is the review board." He steepled his fingers. "So the plan is set. Phase 1. We wait for him to self-destruct for 30 days. Phase 2. We reclaim the land. Phase 3. We reclaim the fund. Phase 4. Erasure." "What about Sienna Stone?" Emily asked. "Miss Stone," Miss Price said, "is a symptom, not the disease. She's a social media influencer, and you know what happens to influencers who are tied to public messy and losing scandals. They lose their brands. We've already had quiet off-the-record conversations with her top 2 sponsors. They are reviewing her contracts. Emily nodded. He took 10 years of my life. He thinks he can erase me with a new younger woman. He's about to find out what erasure really means. One last thing, Emily, Marcus said, his tone gentle. This will be a public fight. He will get loud. The press will get involved. Forbes, the Wall Street Journal. They love a good mogul versus mogul story. Are you prepared for that? Emily thought of him standing on the step of Sienna's smirk, of the cold rain and the sound of the deadbolt. He called me empty, she said. Let him. I'd rather be underestimated. Let him roar. The quiet ones are the ones you have to watch. The first week was a storm of legal bluster. Damien, having fired Stanley Croft, hired Barrington and Lynch, a notoriously aggressive litigation firm known for scorched earth tactics. They filed a dozen motions. Motion to dismiss the lease default, denied. Motion to force mediation, denied. Motion for an injunction against the Hayes Trust, denied. Motion to unfreeze Vasa Capital assets, denied. With every denial, Damien's rage grew. He was hemorrhaging money. His new lawyers demanded a $5 million retainer, which he had to pay from his dwindling personal accounts. Sienna was becoming a problem. What do you mean my Stones Glow sponsor pulled out? She shrieked, throwing a $1,000 vase across the living room. They said my brand alignment was compromised. It's just a legal tactic, baby, Damien kept saying, the words sounding hollow even to him. Emily's just trying to scare us. Well, it's working, Sienna cried. My comments are a war zone. They're calling me a home wrecker. Forbes just ran an article, Vassar's vexing lease. They're not calling you a king, Damien. They're calling you a squatter. He'd seen the article. It had been devastating. It didn't paint him as a titan of industry. It painted him as a fool. New money mogul Damien Vassar, who built his dream home on a 99-year ground lease, seems to have forgotten the cardinal rule of real estate, always read the fine print. Now a dispute with the powerful old money Hayes family threatens his entire empire. His investors, once cowed by his bravado, were now in open revolt. With the fund frozen, their money was trapped. The Apex merger had collapsed, costing the fund a potential $3 billion in future earnings. A class action lawsuit was being prepared. Damien was a prisoner in his own glass palace. He couldn't leave because his lawyers advised him that abandoning the property could be used against him. He was trapped inside with a rapidly deteriorating Sienna, who was no longer the fun, adoring woman he'd cheated with. She was a liability, documenting their struggle on social media. Day 12 of the lockout, she'd pout to her phone from the edge of the infinity pool. That psycho ex-wife has frozen all of Dee's money. But we're still strong. Couple goals, haters gonna hate. Marcus Thorne's office had gleefully entered that video as Exhibit F in the failure to cure default file. On day 20, Damien broke. He did the one thing he swore he would never do. He drove to the Hayes Tower. He was not allowed in. I'm sorry, sir, the security guard, a man built like a mountain, said, This is a private building. You are not on the list. I am Damien Vassar. I am here to see my wife. Mrs. Vassar is not in residence, the guard said, unblinking. I know she's in there. Emily. Emily! He bellowed, a madman in a $10,000 suit screaming in the lobby. You can't do this. This is my money. This is my life. You want a settlement. Name your price. $50 million. Two more guards emerged. They gently but immovably escorted a struggling Damien Vassar out onto the sidewalk, just as a TMZ camera flashed. The next day, the headline was, "Vassar's Meltdown Mogul Evicted from Tower." In the penthouse, Emily watched the footage, her face impassive. Marcus Thorne switched off the television. "He's unraveling," Marcus said. "It's time to prepare for Phase 2. He has 10 days left. He will not cure the default. He is in fact doubling down on the scandalous behavior." "He looks," Emily said, "desperate." "He is. He has no leverage. He is trying to build a new house on top of a sinkhole," Marcus said. "Now the press, they've been calling. The Wall Street Journal wants an exclusive, a profile on the quiet woman behind the Hayes Trust." "No," Emily said. "He wants the spotlight. Let him have it. I'm not a public figure. I'm a landowner and a controlling partner. My actions will speak for me. Let him be the one to answer the questions." "Very wise," Marcus said. "Let him feed the narrative of the crazy, vengeful ex-wife. It will make his public statements all the more damaging to himself." Damien did exactly that. He gave an exclusive to a right-wing financial podcast, ranting for an hour. "It's a conspiracy," he'd shouted into the microphone. "My ex, who, by the way, was a nothing when I met her, has teamed up with these ancient dinosaur lawyers to steal my company. They're using an archaic illegal morals clause to strip me of my assets. This is a betrayal of capitalism. This is un-American. The financial world, especially the old money world, did not agree. The consensus was simpler. He broke a contract. He's a bad investment." On day 28, Sienna left. Damien came downstairs to find her luggage, 16 matching Louis Vuitton pieces in the foyer. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice dead. "I'm going to my mother's in Miami," she said, not meeting his eye. She was wearing sunglasses indoors. I can't be here, Damien. This is bad for my brand. My agent said I need to distance myself from this toxic narrative." "Toxic narrative. You are the narrative," he screamed. "You're the adulterous cohabitation." "Don't you put this on me," she shrieked back. "You told me she was a nobody. You told me you were the king. You're just a tenant. And you're being evicted. I am not going to be evicted with you. So all that love, all that passion, it was just for the house, for the money. It was for the life, Damien," she said, "and you don't have it anymore. Goodbye." She walked out, leaving him utterly alone in the cavernous, silent mansion. He was alone for 2 days. He drank. He broke things. He stared at the walls he owned on the land he didn't. On day 30 at 11:59 p.m. he sat in his office, a bottle of scotch in his hand, watching the clock. He was still waiting for a call. For Emily to say, "Okay, you've learned your lesson. Here are my demands." The call never came. At 12:01 a.m., the lights in the mansion shut off. The entire house, the security system, the AC, the network. Everything. He fumbled for his phone. No service. A cell blocker. He heard a noise, a heavy metallic clanking at his front gate. He ran to the window. A black sedan was pulling up his driveway, followed by a large van from the county sheriff's department. The doorbell rang. It was not an electric chime. It was someone outside banging on the oak with their fist. He stumbled to the door, his heart hammering. He opened it. It wasn't Emily. It was Marcus Thorne, flanked by 2 sheriff's deputies. He was holding a very thick, bound document. Damien Vassar, Marcus said, his voice devoid of all emotion. It is 12:03 a.m. on the 11th. Your right to cure the default on your lease has expired. The Hayes Land Trust has terminated said lease. You are, as of this moment, trespassing on private property. You can't, Damien stammered. This is my house I own. This house? You own this house? Marcus corrected. As per clause 34 tonk. All improvements on the land are now forfeit. The house belongs to the trust. These officers are here to escort you from the premises. One of the deputies stepped forward. Sir, we just need you to come with us. You can take your personal effects. A suitcase. My things. Damien looked around wildly. My art, my computers, all improvements and fixtures, Marcus said, which includes art affixed to the walls, custom furniture, and integrated technology are now the property of the landowner. You may take your clothes, your shoes, and your toiletries. You have 10 minutes. This is theft, Damien roared, lunging at Marcus. The deputies were on him in a second, pinning his arms behind his back. Mr. Vassar, do not assault an officer of the court, the deputy said, his voice bored. Damien sagged, defeated. Emily, is she here? He whispered, searching for her. He needed to see her, to make her see. What Mrs. Vassar is not here, Marcus said. She has no desire to see you. She is, I believe, attending the opera. 10 minutes later, Damien Vassar was standing on the same gravel driveway where he had thrown his wife out 30 days prior. He was holding a single small duffel bag. His suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven. The locks on the door, his door, were being changed by a locksmith from the van. Where am I supposed to go? He asked the empty night. That is no longer our concern, Marcus Thorne said. He got into his sedan. Good night, Mr. Vassar. The car pulled away, leaving Damien alone on the curb in the dark. The automated sprinklers, now controlled by the trust, chose that precise moment to turn on, dousing him in a spray of cold recycled water. For 2 weeks, Damien Vassar ceased to exist. He holed up in a suite at a high-end extended-stay hotel, the Omni, not the Ritz. He had to pay for it with his last remaining personal credit card. His entire world was gone. He was a pariah. The class action suit from the Vassar Capital investors was moving forward. They were suing him personally for gross mismanagement and fiduciary negligence. His reputation was not just damaged, it was obliterated. He spent his days in a bathrobe, obsessively refreshing news sites. He saw Emily, but only in glimpses. She was photographed at a gala for the city library, the one she'd been excited about. She was wearing a simple, elegant, dark blue dress, and she was smiling. She looked lighter, younger. She was with a man. Not with him, but standing next to him. A handsome, silver-haired man. Damien Googled him. Arthur Pencave. A British architect specializing in sustainable public spaces. They were laughing. The rage which had simmered down to a cold dread roared back to life. She was laughing, while he was ruined. He had one last card to play. One he hadn't wanted to use. A private investigator he'd paid personally with cash he kept in a safe a year ago, not to watch Emily, but to dig up dirt on her perfect family. The Hayeses were clean, but the PI had found one thing: a family secret. Damien got dressed. He put on his last clean suit. He took a cab to the Hayes Tower. He didn't try the lobby. He went to the parking garage. He waited. After 3 hours, Emily's hybrid, pathetic car pulled in. She got out carrying a briefcase. "Emily!" he shouted, stepping from behind a concrete pillar. She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. She just sighed as if he were a piece of trash she had to step over. "Damien, you're not supposed to be here. This is private property. You're violating your restraining order." "That order is a joke. Just like you," he spat, advancing. "You think you've won, don't you? You took my house. You took my company. You're a thief." "I took nothing," Emily said, her voice echoing in the empty garage. "I simply stopped you from taking any more. You defaulted, Damien. On the lease, on the fund, on us. These are the consequences." "Consequences?" He laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. "You want to talk about consequences? How about the consequences for your aunt, Isabella Hayes?" Emily's blood ran cold. She took an involuntary step back. "Ah," Damien smiled, a predator's grin. "I see I have your attention. Isabella Hayes, the black sheep. The one who really owned the trust until she was declared incompetent in 1998. And her loving brother, your father, took control and locked her away in a high-end sanitarium in Switzerland. You're not the owner, Emily. You're the daughter of a thief. Your entire fortune is built on a lie, on a crime." He pulled a file from his briefcase. "I have the medical records, Emily. The lost ones. The ones that say she was eccentric, not insane. I have the letters she wrote. How long do you think your ironclad reputation lasts when this hits the press? How long before the entire Hayes Trust is invalidated?" Emily was silent, her face pale. "Here's the deal," Damien said, stepping closer. "You're going to give me my company back. You're going to give me— No, not the house. I don't want that poisoned place. You're going to give me $500 million. A clean break. And this," he waved the folder, "disappears. You get to keep your dirty little family secret." He was inches from her now, his eyes boring into hers, smelling his victory. "You're not so high and mighty now, are you? You're just like me. You're just empty." Emily looked down at the folder. Then she looked up at his triumphant, desperate face, and she smiled. "Oh, Damien," she said, her voice filled with a profound, aching pity. "You really do only read the headlines, don't you?" What are you talking about?" "Aunt Isabella," Emily said, "was my favorite person in the world. She was eccentric. She was a brilliant, beautiful artist who suffered from severe bipolar disorder at a time when the world and the press were not kind." I, Damien faltered. "My father didn't lock her away. He protected her. He moved her to the best facility in the world, away from people like you who would have exploited her. And incompetent. She wasn't declared incompetent. She willingly signed over her proxy rights to my father, so she could live her life in peace, not be bothered with land deeds and fiduciary duties. And do you know who she left as her sole heir? The one person who visited her every summer, who read to her, who loved her for who she was." Emily tapped her own chest. "Me. No. The sanitarium. You mean the Pince Verdant clinic. It's lovely. I was just there last month. I took Aunt Isabella to lunch." Damien's face crumpled. She's alive. She's 78. She's on new medication, and her paintings are having a retrospective at the Met. That secret. It's the proudest part of my family's history, that we protect our own." Emily took the file from his limp hand. "You have nothing, Damien. You never did. You had no power in our marriage, so you had to invent it with cruelty. You had no real wealth, just leverage. And now you have no blackmail. You're just a sad, angry man in a parking garage." She started to walk away. I'll tell them about the demolition," he screamed at her back. "That's my last ace. You think your green investors will like that you're tearing down a $100 million house? The waste, the hypocrisy." Emily stopped. She turned back. "The demolition. Damien, who told you I was demolishing the house. My lawyers, it's public record. The permit to erase it." "Yes," Emily said, walking back to him, her eyes bright. "We filed the permit. But we're not erasing it." "That's your move." "Then what?" "The house is a structure," Emily said. "It's ugly. It's cold. It's yours. But it's also 25,000 square feet of usable spools. The Vassar Capital investors, the ones you ruined, they've formed a committee. They've partnered with the Hayes Trust. We are deconstructing the house. Deconstructing piece by piece. The marble is going to the city library. The glass panels are going to a new community greenhouse. The steel beams are being donated to Habitat for Humanity. Even the high-end kitchen appliances are going to a local women's shelter. We are recycling your monument, Damien. It will be salvaged piece by piece and repurposed into things that actually help people. Things that I value." Damien looked as if she had physically struck him. "The Vassar estate," Emily concluded, "is gone. In its place, that architect I was photographed with, Mr. Pencavel. He's designing the Isabella Hayes Public Park and Garden, a quiet, beautiful place for people to sit, to read, to be. My aunt is thrilled." She left him. She walked to the elevator, her steps light. She didn't look back. Damien Vassar sank to his knees on the cold concrete floor of the parking garage, holding a useless folder. A man truly and completely empty. The final phase was not swift, but it was total. The deconstruction of the Vassar estate became the feel-good story of the year. Local news crews filmed as crews meticulously removed the giant gaudy glass panels. Emily Hayes was lauded as a New Age philanthropist, not just donating money, but turning an emblem of toxic greed into a public good. Sienna Stone, in a desperate attempt to stay relevant, tried to launch a tell-all YouTube channel about her abusive relationship with Damien. It backfired. Marcus Thorne's office sent her a single cease and desist, reminding her that she was on video gleefully participating in the scandalous behavior. The public comments were so brutal, she deleted her channel and her Instagram. She was last seen selling Stone's Glow Tanner out of the trunk of a used car. The class action lawsuit against Damien Vassar was successful. The investors led by the controlling partner. Emily clawed back every asset tied to the Vassar name. His remaining personal accounts, his hidden offshore holdings, all were seized. He was forced to declare personal bankruptcy. His scorched earth lawyers from Barrington and Lynch had dropped him the moment his money ran out, and they too sued him for non-payment. Damien, stripped of his wealth, his reputation and his home, became a ghost in the city he once claimed to own. The final legal nail was driven in 6 months after the eviction. Damien was in a small, windowless courtroom, his cheap public defender at his side. He was facing charges of fraud stemming from his lies to his investors. Emily was there, not as a plaintiff, but as a spectator. She sat in the back row wearing a simple professional suit. The judge read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. As Damien was being led out, his eyes found hers. The arrogance was gone. The rage was gone. There was only a hollow, pathetic plea. He expected to see triumph in her face. He expected a smirk, a look of "I told you so." But Emily's face was calm. It was not triumph. It was not even satisfaction. It was closure. As he passed us, he whispered, his voice hoarse, "Why? Why did you do all this? You could have just left. You could have just taken half." Emily met his gaze. Her voice was quiet, heard only by him. "You threw me out in the rain, Damien. You told me I was nothing. You stood in the doorway with that woman in my robe, and you told me I was empty. I was angry. You were honest," she corrected. "In that one moment you showed me exactly who you were. You were a man who builds his monuments on other people's foundations. You didn't just own the house, Damien. The house owned you. The money owned you. The idea of power owned you." "Emily, I'm sorry." "I know," she said, and the pity in her voice was the most devastating blow of all. "You threw me out not knowing I owned the land, but your real mistake was throwing me out not knowing who I was. The land was just a detail. You forgot you married a Hayes. We don't just own things, Damien. We endure." The bailiff tugged his arm. "Let's go, Vassar." Damien Vassar, the former king, was led away, leaving Emily Hayes Vassar alone in the courtroom. She sat for a moment, then stood, adjusted her jacket, and walked out into the sunlight. 1 year later, the Isabella Hayes Public Park opened. It was the anti-mansion. Instead of a 20-acre monument to one man's ego, it was a winding, beautiful space of native plants, quiet benches, and a small, elegant water feature made from the recycled marble. Emily was there, cutting a simple ribbon. Her Aunt Isabella, vibrant and sharp in a colourful scarf, was at her side. Marcus Thorne was beaming. The park was an immediate success. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was used. After the ceremony, Emily was walking the gravel path, the same path where she had once stood in the rain, when a man approached her. It was Arthur Penkalkavel, the architect. "It's beautiful, Emily," he said, his voice warm. "You did amazing work, Arthur. It's breathing. The land can finally breathe." "As can you, it seems," he said, smiling. "I read in Forbes a different kind of article this time, that the Vassar Capital Fund has been reborn." Emily laughed. "We're calling it the Hayes Restoration Fund. We're taking all that new money aggression and pouring it into old-world projects, libraries, parks, public art, restoring the city's foundation." "A much better use for capital," Arthur said. "And are you, the controlling partner, happy?" Emily looked out over the city. The sun was setting and the view was, as Damien had once said, a king's view. But it felt different now. It wasn't a view to be owned. It was a view to be shared. "For the first time in a very long time, Arthur," she said, I'm not just not empty. I'm full." "Good," he said. "In that case, would the controlling partner be interested in getting some coffee with a humble architect?" "I think," Emily said, smiling a real, genuine smile, "that can be arranged." They walked out of the park together. Two people on solid ground, ready to build something new. The old saying goes, before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. But this was never about revenge. This was about restoration. Emily didn't destroy Damien's life. She just stopped letting him build it on top of hers. He thought his power came from his monument of a house, but he forgot that a house is nothing without the land beneath it. And a man is nothing without his integrity. What did you think of Emily's story? Was her karma a perfect act of justice or a cold, calculated destruction? We read every single one of your comments, so let us know your thoughts below. If you loved this story of drama twists and ultimate consequences, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to see that the quiet ones are always the strongest. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on all notifications. We drop stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. In the sterile silence of courtroom 3B, a woman sat alone. They called her delusional. Simple. A flighty, fragile creature who needed protection from her own fantasies. Her husband, a titan of industry, watched with pitying eyes as his lawyer painted her as a child. The gallery, filled with his associates, smirked. The mockery was a physical force, pressing down on her. They were here to have her legally erased, to take her freedom in the name of care. But they made one mistake. They believed the simple dress. They believed the quiet demeanor. They had no idea that the woman they were trying to commit could buy the entire building. The air in the New York County Surrogate's court was stale, thick with the scent of old paper and cheap floor wax. It was a room designed to intimidate, all dark wood and high ceilings, and on this Tuesday morning, Ilara Hayes felt the weight of every carved panel. She sat at the defendant's table, a study in forced stillness. Her dress was simple, a shade of beige that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, revealing a face pale and devoid of makeup. She looked, as her husband had intended, like a ghost. At the adjacent table, Julian Thorne, her husband, looked immaculate. His suit was a custom Brioni, the precise grey of a gathering storm cloud. He was a man who commanded space, his broad shoulders and confident posture a stark contrast to Ilara's shrinkage. Beside him sat Alistair Finch, a senior partner from Sullivan & Cromwell, a man whose tailored suits cost more than the average car, and whose voice was a smooth, weaponized baritone. "Your Honor," Finch was saying, addressing Judge Evelyn Reed, "we are not here to punish. We are here to protect." Judge Reed, a woman who had seen everything New York had to offer, peered over her glasses. "Protect her from what, exactly, Mr. Finch? Her husband?" Finch smiled, a thin, patronizing gesture. "From herself, Your Honor. From her own unfortunate delusions." A titter of laughter, rissédi from the gallery, a peanut gallery composed entirely of Julian's sycophantic junior executives and board members. Ilara kept her eyes fixed on the water pitcher in front of her. "My client, Mr. Julian Thorne," Finch continued, pacing slowly, "is a self-made man. He built Thorne Properties from the ground up. He is a pillar of this community. When he met Ilara Hayes, she was, shall we say, adrift. A quiet, introverted woman with a passion for botany. He gave her a life beyond her wildest dreams." "Objection," came a voice, so thin and reedy it barely registered. All eyes turned to Ilara's lawyer. Mr. Aris Kovac was the opposite of Alistair Finch. His suit was off the rack, his hair was perpetually messy, and he was currently fumbling with a stack of files, one of which slipped and scattered across the floor. He looked like a man who had gotten lost on his way to a traffic violation. "On what grounds, Mr. Kovac?" Judge Reed asked, her patience already thin. "Relevance," Kovac mumbled, bending to retrieve his papers. "Mr. Finch is painting a narrative, not presenting facts." "Mr. Finch, get to the facts," the judge ordered. Gladly, Your Honor. Finch's smile widened. He had wanted this interruption. It made Kovac look incompetent, and, by extension, made Alara look even more helpless. The facts are these. Mrs. Thorne, or Miss Hayes as she prefers, has, over the last 18 months, begun to exhibit behavior inconsistent with a rational mind. He clicked a remote. A screen descended. On it was a scanned page from a journal, written in Alara's elegant script. She claims to own vast swathes of land, Finch read, his voice dripping with mock seriousness. The pines in the north are not being properly managed. I must speak to the Forestry Service. Your Honor, she is referring to a national park. She believes she owns a national park. More laughter. Julian shook his head, a performance of profound sadness. She has also, Finch continued, attempted to donate several $1 million to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. When informed by my client's financial manager that she did not have several $1 million, she became erratic, claiming the manager was stealing from her. The most disturbing, however, Finch said, lowering his voice, are her claims of her family. She told Dr. Harding, our psychiatric expert, that her family practically invented the banking system in the New Amsterdam colony. Delusions of grandeur, Your Honor, are a classic symptom. He gestured to Alara, who had not moved, had not flinched. This woman believes she is, and I quote, wealthier than God. She told my client she could buy his company and turn it into a bird sanctuary. She is a danger to herself. Mr. Thorne's petition for conservatorship is an act of love, an act of desperation to save the woman he adores from the prison of her own mind. Alistair Finch sat down. The silence in the room was heavy, judgmental. The narrative was set. Julian Thorne was the long-suffering husband. Alara Hayes was the mad woman in the attic. Judge Reed looked at Alara. Mrs. Thorne, do you have anything to say to this? Alara looked up. Her eyes, clear and blue, met the judge's. She opened her mouth, but only a small sound escaped. She looked at Julian. His face was a mask of concern, but his eyes were cold, victorious. He gave her a tiny, infinitesimal shrug, as if to say, "This is your own fault." She looked down at her hands. "No, Your Honor. Not right now." The mockery was complete. She was not just a defendant. She was a tragedy, a piece of broken porcelain her powerful husband was dutifully trying to glue back together. "Very well," Judge Reed sighed. "Mr. Finch, call your first witness." The mockery in the courtroom was built on a lie, but it was a lie Alara herself had cultivated for 12 years. The truth was not a delusion. It was a legacy. Alara was not a Hayes. She was a Vandermeer. The Vandermeers had arrived in New Amsterdam in 1638, while other families, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the Astors, built empires of steel and oil and real estate. The Vandermeers built an empire of silence. They dealt in capital, in land, and in sovereign debt. But they did so from the shadows. Their name was not on libraries or university halls. It was on the original ledgers of the Dutch East India Company, on the private deeds of Swiss banks, and on the land titles for vast, vast tracts of the earth that had never once seen a developer. The first rule of the Vandermeer family was anonymitas est potestas. Anonymity is power. To be public was to be a target. To be flashy was to be weak. Alara had been raised on sprawling, isolated estates in the Hudson Valley and quiet, fortified chateaux in the Swiss Alps. She was taught to manage forestry reports before she was taught to drive. She understood commodity futures before she had her first kiss. She met Julian Thorne at a benefit for the New York Botanical Garden, where she was volunteering under her mother's maiden name, Hayes. She was arranging a display of rare orchids. He was a major donor, loud, charismatic, and utterly captivated by her. He saw her as simple, pure, untouched by the cynical hunger of the city. He mistook her silence for naivete. He mistook her lack of interest in his money for a lack of interest in all money. He called her his wildflower, his little sparrow. She, in turn, had been starved for a life outside the sterile, high-stakes world of her family. Julian was alive. He built things. He was loud and present and real. She fell in love not with his money, which, compared to hers, was a rounding error, but with his vitality. When they married, her family's lawyers at Pictet, the ultra-private Zurich bank that had managed the Vandermeer Trust for 7 generations, drafted an ironclad prenuptial agreement. Julian's lawyers, focused on protecting his assets from her, had barely glanced at the clauses protecting her assets from him, assuming they were negligible. For 12 years, Ilara played the part. She lived in his penthouse on the Upper East Side. She spent his generous allowance. She never once accessed the VDM Global Trust. It simply sat, compounding, managed by men in Zurich and Geneva. She wanted to be Mrs. Thorne, not Ilara Vandermeer, matriarch in waiting. The cracks began 2 years ago. Julian's vitality had soured into arrogance. His business was over-leveraged. The charming compliments became cutting remarks. What would you know about it, Ilara? You've never worked a real day in your life. Don't worry your simple little head about the finances, darling. Then came the gaslighting. He would move her keys, then accuse her of being forgetful. He would cancel a dinner reservation and claim she'd gotten the date wrong. When she finally discovered the extent of his infidelities, blatant, disrespectful, with women half his age, she confronted him. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply told him she was leaving him. That was when Julian Thorne, real estate mogul, realized his mistake. He wasn't married to a simpleton. He was married to a quiet woman. But in his world, quiet meant weak. He saw his business crumbling and saw her as his last, best asset. He believed that if he could control her, he could control her small inheritance. When she refused, he decided to break her. He hired Dr. Lena Harding, a therapist to the stars, known for providing the diagnoses her clients paid for. He fed Dr. Harding stories of Ilara's eccentricities. She talks to her plants, Doctor. Full conversations. She has this journal. She writes about her forests, her islands. It's like a child playing pretend. Ilara, trapped in the penthouse and isolated from her old life, began to write those things as an anchor to reality. The pines in Switzerland need managing. It wasn't a delusion. It was a memo she couldn't send. The deed for the Fiji island needs to be reviewed. It wasn't a fantasy. It was a to-do list. Julian, reading her journal, saw not a to-do list, but a symptom list. He saw his path. He would have her declared incompetent. As her conservator, he would gain access to whatever minor trust fund she had. He would save his company, dispose of his crazy wife by placing her in a comfortable wellness center in Connecticut, and move on. He had miscalculated. He mistook the depth of the ocean for a shallow pond. And Ilara, pushed to the edge, finally broke the first rule of her family. She made a call, a single, encrypted call to a number in Zurich. "It's Ilara," she had whispered, locked in her bathroom. "He is trying to erase me. Send Aris, and send Dr. Vogt. It's time. Dr. Harding, please take the stand." Dr. Lena Harding was a woman who looked like she'd been sculpted from expensive marble. She wore a severe white suit, and her blonde hair was pulled into a tight architectural bun. She exuded an aura of cold, clinical authority. Alistair Finch approached her. "Doctor, you have been treating Mrs. Thorne for how long?" "Mr. Thorne hired me for spousal consultation 6 months ago," Dr. Harding said, her voice smooth and measured. "I have been in one-on-one sessions with Mrs. Thorne for the past 4 months. And in that time, what is your professional diagnosis?" "Mrs. Thorne presents a classic, if severe, case of histrionic personality disorder, coupled with strong, narcissistic fantasies and a profound break from reality. She has constructed an elaborate, fictional world in which she is a person of immense power and wealth." Finch nodded gravely. "Can you give the court an example?" "Certainly." Dr. Harding opened a file. "In our session on September 12th, I asked Alara about her childhood. She described a life of global tutors and board meetings, where she held a voting share. She claimed her family loaned money to governments. When I gently pressed her for details, a family name, a company name, she became agitated and shut down, stating it was private. This is a common defense mechanism. The fantasy is so fragile that it cannot withstand scrutiny." Julian, from his table, put his head in his hands, the very picture of a heartbroken man. "And the journals, Doctor?" Finch prompted. "The ones Mr. Thorne discovered when he was looking for her passport." "The journals are the most damning evidence," Dr. Harding said. "They are not diaries. They are ledgers of a fantasy. She writes about auditing gold reserves in Switzerland. She mentions her shipping lanes in the Pacific. She even details a plan to purchase a majority stake in a company. I believe, yes, a company called Thorne Properties." A gasp went through the gallery. Finch let the moment hang. "She planned to purchase her own husband's company?" Finch asked, feigning shock. "In her mind, yes. She wrote that she would fire the board and turn the flagship Thorne Tower into a vertical farm. It is a complete and total psychotic break, rooted in an inferiority complex and a desperate need for control. So, in your professional opinion, Dr. Harding, is Alara Thorne competent to manage her own affairs? To make her own medical or financial decisions?" "Absolutely not," Dr. Harding stated, her voice resonating with finality. "She requires immediate, inpatient psychiatric care and a court-appointed conservator to manage her life. Left to her own devices, she is a danger to herself and to the financial well-being of her husband." "Thank you, Doctor. No further questions." Finch sat down. The case seemed closed. The judge looked at Aris Kovac. "Mr. Kovac, your witness." Kovac stood, shuffling his papers. He looked like a lamb being led to the slaughter. "Ah, yes, Dr. Harding. Thank you for being here." He seemed to shrink under her cold gaze. You testified that Mr. Thorne hired you, correct?" "Yes, for spousal consultations." "Right. And Mr. Thorne pays your invoices, which I see here are quite substantial. $100,000 for this evaluation." Finch shot up. "Objection, badgering the witness." "Sustained," Judge Reed said. "Mr. Kovac, where are you going with this?" Just trying to understand the situation, Your Honor." Kovac gulped. "Dr. Harding, you said my client's fantasies are fragile and cannot withstand scrutiny. Is that right?" "That is correct. It is a hallmark of the disorder. So, if these things could withstand scrutiny, if they were, say, true, then your diagnosis would be incorrect, wouldn't it?" Dr. Harding actually laughed, a short, sharp, barking sound. "Mr. Kovac, if I believed my patient's delusions, I would be as sick as she is. It is not possible for them to be true." "But if they were," Kovac pressed, a tiny spark of steel appearing in his voice. If pigs could fly, Mr. Kovacs. Yes, if her claims were factually true, the diagnosis of a reality break would be void. But they are not. She is not a global financier. She is a sick woman. Right. Thank you, Doctor. Kovacs sat down, fumbling with his water glass. Finch smirked at Julian. It was a rout. Mr. Finch, the judge said, do you have any further witnesses? Just one, Your Honor. I call Mr. Julian Thorne. Julian took the stand, his face a mask of tragic nobility. Finch led him through a gentle series of questions. How he loved his wife. How he missed the simple girl he married. How her sickness had torn their lives apart. Mr. Thorne, Finch said, what was the final straw, the moment you knew you had to act? Julian paused, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. It was last month. I have a major deal pending. The Hudson Yards extension. It's a legacy project. He looked at the judge. She got on the phone. She called my partners at Goldman Sachs. She told them she was pulling their line of credit, that she was foreclosing on my deal. He choked back a sob. I had to spend all night doing damage control. They thought she was me, that she was my crazy wife. It almost killed the project. I realized then, I can't protect her anymore. Not on my own. I need the court's help. I just want my Elara back. He buried his face in his hands. The gallery was silent, moved by his performance. Judge Reed looked at Kovacs. Cross-examination, Mr. Kovacs? Or have we all heard enough? Kovacs stood up. The shuffling, nervous energy was gone. His papers were perfectly squared on the table. When he spoke, his voice was no longer reedy. It was cold, precise, and resonant. Mr. Thorne, you just testified that your wife called your partners at Goldman Sachs. Yes, Julian said, looking up, wary of the change in tone. And you testified that she threatened to pull their line of credit. A ridiculous, delusional statement. Correct. Of course, Julian said. Because your wife, Kovacs continued, has no relationship with Goldman Sachs, no assets with them, no power. None whatsoever, Julian scoffed. She has a Nordstrom card and a joint checking account I fund. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. No further questions, Your Honor. Kovacs sat. Finch looked confused. The punchline had failed to land. Judge Reed sighed. Mr. Kovacs, is this the entirety of your defense? You've presented no witnesses, no counter-evidence. All you've done is ask two hypothetical questions. My apologies, Your Honor, Kovacs said, rising smoothly. The defense's case was predicated on Mr. Finch's presentation. I was simply waiting for him to finish. Kovacs turned to the courtroom door. The defense calls its first witness, Dr. Anselm Vogt. The man who entered the courtroom was the antithesis of Julian Thorne. He was thin, precise, and wore a dark, conservative suit that was clearly expensive, but utterly devoid of fashion. He looked like an undertaker, or perhaps an old-world academic. He carried a slim, locked leather briefcase. Please state your name and occupation for the record, Kovacs said, his voice now ringing with the authority that Finch had possessed moments before. Dr. Anselm Vogt. I am the Chief Executive Officer and Senior Managing Partner of the Pictet Group, based in Zurich, Switzerland. Alistair Finch, who had been whispering to Julian, stopped. His head snapped up. He knew that name. Pictet wasn't a bank you applied to. It was a bank that found you. They didn't manage millionaires. They managed nations. They managed dynasties. Judge Reed, too, recognized the name. Her pen hovered. Dr. Vogt, Kovacs said, you've come a long way. Why are you here? I am here at the request of our client, Ms. Elara van der Meer. Julian Thorne laughed out loud. "Vandermeer, what is this, a joke?" "Silence, Mr. Thorne," Judge Reed snapped, her eyes locked on Vogt. "Dr. Vogt," Kovacs continued, "please describe the Pictet Group's relationship with Ms. Vandermeer, also known as Ilara Hayes, or Ilara Thorne." "The Pictet Group," Vogt said, his voice accented, clinical, "has been the primary asset manager for the Vandermeer family since 1805. We are the administrators of the VDM Global Trust. Miss Ilara Vandermeer is the 7th-generation primary beneficiary and, since her 30th birthday, the sole directorial trustee of that fund." The air in the room became thin. The smirks in the gallery had vanished, replaced by a confused, dawning dread. A trust," Finch stammered, standing up. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. This is a competency hearing, not a financial." "It is entirely relevant, Mr. Finch." Kovacs' voice was a whip crack. "Your entire case rests on the premise that my client's belief in her own wealth is a delusion. Your own expert, Dr. Harding, testified that if these beliefs were true, her diagnosis would be void. We are here to establish the truth." "Proceed, Mr. Kovacs," Judge Reed said, her voice quiet. "Dr. Vogt, Mr. Finch presented my client's journal as evidence of fantasy. He specifically mocked her claim of managing forests. Can you speak to this?" Dr. Vogt opened his briefcase. "I can. The VDM Trust holds 14,000 hectares of sustainable timber forest in the Swiss Emmental Valley, 5,000 hectares in British Columbia, and a controlling interest in the Aracruz Cellulose Company in Brazil. Ms. Vandermeer personally chairs the quarterly oversight committee for these assets. Her notes are her homework." Dr. Harding, in the front row, went the color of her white suit. "Mr. Finch also mocked her delusions about owning islands," Kovacs said. "The trust holds the title, free and clear, to 2 islands in the Grenadines and 1 in the Fijian archipelago, which is operated as a private reserve for endangered wildlife," Vogt recited, as if reading a grocery list. "And Dr. Harding found it particularly damning that my client planned to purchase Thorne Properties and turn it into a vertical farm." "Ah, yes," Dr. Vogt said, adjusting his glasses. "We discussed this. Ms. Vandermeer was displeased with the company's Q3 performance and its high leverage. She asked us to prepare a valuation for a potential hostile takeover. We advised against it. The company's debt structure is, how you say, a mess. We would not recommend the acquisition at this time." Alistair Finch collapsed into his chair. He looked at Julian, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Julian Thorne was no longer the charismatic mogul. He was a statue. His face was waxy, his eyes wide and unblinking. The man who had built his identity on being the richest, smartest man in every room had just been exposed as a pretender. "Finally, Dr. Vogt," Kovacs said, walking toward the witness stand. "My client is accused of delusions of grandeur, claiming she is wealthier than God. While we cannot speak to the latter, can you speak to the former? Mr. Thorne testified, my client has no assets besides a Nordstrom card. Can you provide the court with a summary valuation of the VDM Global Trust as of the market's close yesterday?" "Objection," Finch shrieked, finding his voice. "Your Honor, financial privacy. This is prejudicial." "It is the entire case, Mr. Finch," Judge Reed countered. "You based your petition on her fantasy finances. I'm going to hear the reality. Dr. Vogt, you may answer." Dr. Vogt looked at Ilara. She gave a single, slow nod. "As of 4:00 p.m. Zurich time yesterday," Vogt said, consulting a single sheet of paper, "the total liquid and managed assets of the VDM Global Trust, for which Ms. Ilara Vandermeer is the sole directorial trustee, are valued at $9,244,000,000 US dollars. A camera flashed in the back. A journalist had snuck in. A woman in the gallery gasped and fainted. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. Julian Thorne made a sound, a low, strangled gasp. "Order!" Judge Reed slammed her gavel. "Order in this court!" The room, once filled with mockery, was now saturated with a different, more potent emotion. Fear. Alistair Finch looked as though he'd been struck by lightning. His multi-$1,000 suit suddenly looked cheap, his confidence evaporated. But Aris Kovacs was not finished. "Your Honor," Kovacs said into the stunned silence, "I have one more witness. I call Miss Ilara Vandermeer." Ilara stood. She walked to the witness box, her steps steady. The beige dress no longer looked simple, it looked chosen. It was the quiet, confident luxury of Loro Piana, a brand that cost 10 times as much as the flashiest Gucci, but made no sound. She took the oath. "Ms. Vandermeer," Kovacs began, "why? Why live for 12 years as a simple botanist? Why allow your husband to believe you were adrift?" Ilara looked at Julian. Her gaze was not hateful. It was analytical, like a scientist observing a specimen. "My family has a simple rule," she said, her voice clear and strong, no longer a whisper. "We do not advertise. We do not boast. To do so invites danger. It invites opportunists. I wanted a real life. I wanted to be loved for me, not for my name or my ledger. I fell in love with a man I thought was strong and vibrant. I lived on his terms, in his world, because I loved him." "And what changed?" Kovacs asked. "His world turned out to be a house of cards," Ilara said. "He became cruel, desperate. When his business faltered, he saw me not as his wife, but as a lifeline. He began to gaslight me, to isolate me, to paint me as unstable. He did this so that when he finally made his move, no one would believe me. He assumed my family money was a small, dusty inheritance he could easily control." She turned her gaze to Julian. "He mistook my privacy for weakness. He mistook my silence for stupidity." "Mr. Thorne testified," Kovacs said, "that you called his partners at Goldman Sachs and threatened to pull their line of credit. Was that a delusion, Ms. Vandermeer?" Ilara smiled, a tiny, cold curve of her lips. "No. That was a mercy call. I was giving him a warning. Mr. Thorne may bank with Goldman, but the VDM Trust is one of Goldman's largest institutional clients. We are, in fact, a primary capital source for the private equity division that holds the note on Mr. Thorne's Hudson Yards project. It wasn't a delusion, it was a statement of fact. If I make the call, his project, his entire company, is liquidated by morning." Julian Thorne made a second sound, a high, thin, keen. He was a dead man walking. "And Dr. Harding," Kovacs said, gesturing to the pale-faced psychiatrist. "She diagnosed you based on your journals, your fantasies." "Dr. Harding," Ilara said, "was paid by my husband to find a conclusion. She never once considered that I was working. Those journals were my notes. She diagnosed me as insane because I was doing math she couldn't comprehend. I find her evaluation to be incompetent." Kovacs turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the petition for conservatorship, built on a foundation of lies and deliberate misrepresentation of my client's mental state, is a fraudulent, malicious attack. We move for immediate dismissal with prejudice. Furthermore, we are here to file a countersuit." He slammed a new, massive stack of files onto the table. "We are filing for divorce, citing emotional distress, defamation, and financial fraud." "Fraud?" Julian finally yelled, his voice cracking. "I gave you everything. I paid for everything." "You paid for my groceries, Julian," Elara said, her voice cutting through his. "While you were using my unspoken name and my presence at your parties to shore up your credit with banks who knew exactly who my family was, even if you didn't. You didn't marry a wildflower. You married your bank, and the bank is now calling in the loan." Kovacs held up a final document. "This, Your Honor, is a full forensic audit of Thorn Properties, conducted by Deloitte on behalf of the VDM Trust. It details widespread wire fraud, investor fraud, and the embezzlement of funds to cover Mr. Thorn's personal debts. We are submitting this to the court and, concurrently, to the District Attorney of New York and the SEC. Alistair Finch grabbed his briefcase. "Your Honor, I must recuse myself. A conflict of interest." "You're not going anywhere, Mr. Finch," Judge Reed said, her voice like ice. "Nor are you, Dr. Harding. I am holding you both in contempt. I am scheduling a hearing with the State Bar and the Medical Board regarding your collaboration." She turned to Julian Thorn. The pity was gone, replaced by a cold fury. "Mr. Thorn, you stood in this courtroom and mocked your wife. You tried to use my authority to commit a sane woman and steal her assets. You are the most profoundly arrogant and despicable man I have ever had the misfortune of seeing in my court." Two bailiffs moved to stand behind a catatonic Julian. "Petition for conservatorship is dismissed," the judge declared, her gavel striking the wood like a gunshot. "The assets of Mr. Thorn are hereby frozen, pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. This hearing is concluded." The courtroom erupted. Journalists, now realizing the scale of the story, scrambled for the doors. The gallery of Julian's employees, their faces a mask of terror as they realized their paychecks were now tied to a criminal, stampeded out. Alistair Finch, no longer the predator, was a trapped animal. "Your Honor," he pleaded, "my reputation. I was acting on my clients." "Save it for your disbarment hearing, Mr. Finch," Judge Reed snapped. Dr. Harding was weeping quietly, her perfect marble facade cracking. Julian remained frozen, staring at Elara. He was seeing her for the first time. Not the little sparrow, but the eagle. Elara stood from the witness box. She smoothed her beige dress. Dr. Vogt handed her a simple cashmere coat. Mr. Kovacs, no longer the bumbling public defender, but Aris Kovacs, head of private global litigation for the Vandermeer estate, stood at her side. Julian, as the bailiffs put a hand on his arm, finally spoke to her. "Elara, please, I didn't know. I loved you. I was just scared. The business. Please don't do this." Elara walked past his table. She didn't slow down. She paused, just for a second, and leaned in close enough for only him to hear. "You were right about one thing, Julian," she whispered, her voice devoid of all emotion. "You said you gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." She pulled back, looking him in the eye. "Living as a simple person, with a man I thought loved me. That was my wildest dream." "And you?" she said, gesturing to the courtroom, the bailiffs, the ruins of his life. "You turned it into a nightmare. You didn't try to save me. You tried to bury me." "Elara, wait!" he cried as the bailiffs began to lead him away. She walked out of the courtroom door without looking back. She didn't see him collapse into the chair, a hollowed-out man who had flown too close to the sun, unaware that the sun was, in fact, his wife. Outside the courthouse, a sleek, unadorned, dark grey Maybach was waiting. It bore no license plate, only a diplomatic standard. Dr. Vogt held the door for her. "Where to, Miss Vandermeer?" he asked. Elara looked at the grey New York sky. She had spent 12 years hiding, and 1 hour reclaiming her life. "Let's go to the airport, Anselm," she said. "I believe the pines in Switzerland need my attention." The car pulled silently into traffic, just another expensive vehicle in a city full of them, disappearing completely. The downfall of Julian Thorne was not loud, it was absolute. It wasn't a wrecking ball, it was the meticulous, silent disassembly of a watch. Thorne Properties was declared insolvent within a week. The Hudson Yards project was immediately seized by its primary creditors, a consortium represented by the Pictet Group. The forensic audit Kovacs had produced was so thorough, so damning, that the district attorney's case was airtight. Julian Thorne, denied bail as a flight risk, given his wife's access to private jets and islands, traded his Brioni suits for an orange jumpsuit. Alistair Finch was disbarred. His firm, Sullivan & Cromwell, issued a public apology, paid a 9-figure fine, and erased any trace of his existence. Dr. Lena Harding lost her license and faced multiple lawsuits from former patients, all of whom now questioned the diagnoses they had been given. The story was the talk of New York for a month. The billion-dollar ghost, the tabloids called her. They scrambled for a picture of Ilara Vandermeer. They found none. The few photos that existed of her at parties with Julian were digitally corrupted, mysteriously disappearing from servers. The Vandermeer family, with a quiet word, had re-established their anonymity. The media, finding no purchase, moved on to the next scandal. Ilara never returned to New York. The penthouse she had shared with Julian was sold, its contents auctioned for charity. 6 months later, at a high-stakes auction at Sotheby's in London, a 500,000-acre swath of the Patagonian rainforest, prized by logging and mining corporations, came up for bid. The room was tense, filled with corporate raiders. The bidding was fierce, climbing past $500 million. A representative from a shell corporation bid $600 million. A mining conglomerate countered with $650. From the back of the room, a quiet voice spoke. $1 billion. The room fell silent. All eyes turned. A woman in a simple grey dress sat, holding a bidding paddle. She was unremarkable, save for the man in the dark suit at her side. The auctioneer, recognizing Dr. Anselm Vogt, didn't even question it. "Sold," he said, slamming the gavel, "to the representative of the VDM Global Trust." Ilara stood, handed the paddle to Vogt, and walked out. She had just bought a forest, not for timber, but for preservation. She was on her way to a meeting with the new board of the Thorne Tower, which was, against all odds, in the early stages of its conversion into the world's largest vertical farm and bird sanctuary. She had been mocked for her delusions in a courtroom, painted as a fragile sparrow. But they had forgotten. Even a sparrow has wings, and hers were large enough to cast a shadow over the entire world. The air in the Swiss Emmental Valley was different. It smelled of cold stone, ancient pine, resin, and snow. It was the scent of her childhood, a scent she had almost forgotten during her 12 years in the air-conditioned, perfume-heavy bubble of Manhattan. The chalet was, in fact, a 17th-century fortified manor, built into the side of a mountain, its foundations indistinguishable from the bedrock. It was the unofficial heart of the Vandermeer Trust, a place of silent, absolute security. Ilara stood before a bank of monitors, not in a beige dress, but in simple black wool trousers and a cashmere sweater. She was looking at a live feed from New York. Thorne Tower, that glass and steel monument to Julian's ego, was being gutted. Its opulent marble lobby, where she had once been sneered at by Julian's secretaries, was now a staging ground for hydroponic engineers. Her delusion of a vertical farm was becoming a reality. It was a project of defiant symbolism. She was taking a space built on lies and debt and forcing it to produce something real. something that would feed the very city he had tried to swindle. "The structural reports are positive," Anselm Vogt said, standing beside her. He had not returned to Zurich, but had instead relocated to the Emmental Manor, becoming her de facto chief of staff. "The retrofitting is complex, but the engineers are confident. Phase 1, the Lower Atrium Farm, will be operational in 6 months. "Good," Elara said, her voice quiet, but carrying the unmistakable ring of authority. "I want the first harvest donated, all of it, to the city's food banks." "Of course, Miss Vandermeer." "Anselm," she said, turning from the screen. "You can call me Elara. You've earned it." Vogt gave a rare, thin smile. "As you wish, Elara. We have other matters. The final accounting of the Thorn liquidation." This was the part she dreaded, the last thread connecting her to the life she had tried to build. "Go on," she said. "Julian Thorn was sentenced last week," Vogt reported, his tone clinical. 22 years in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud, securities fraud, and investor fraud. Given his age, it is effectively a life sentence. Elara felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. She felt a profound, cold stillness. The fiery anger was gone. The grief for her lost love had subsided. All that remained was the hard, dense matter of a star that had collapsed. "Alistair Finch," Vogt continued, "has been disbarred. He faces his own criminal trial. As the audit proved, he was not just an accessory, but an active participant in hiding the fraudulent leveraging of assets. He is cooperating fully in the hopes of a reduced sentence." "And Dr. Harding?" "Dr. Lena Harding," Vogt said, with a flicker of distaste. "She forfeited her bail. It appears she used a false passport to flee to a non-extradition country. She has vanished. However, her assets are frozen, and her reputation is non-existent. She will not be practicing medicine again. Anywhere." "So it's done." Elara looked out the window at the sharp, white peaks of the Alps. The smear had been wiped away. The mockery had been silenced. She had won. "Not entirely," Vogt said, his voice hesitant. Elara turned. "What is it?" "The auction. Your purchase of the Patagonian lands. It was a commendable act of conservation, Elara, but it was public. More public than the family has been in a century. It was an auction, Anselm. I had to bid." "You did? But you bid against 2 of the largest, most aggressive resource conglomerates in the world. You didn't just outbid them, you humiliated them, and you did it on the record as the VDM Global Trust. Combined with the New York court records, which we successfully sealed but could not erase, you have put the family name back in play." "I am the family," Elara said, a simple statement of fact. "Yes, which is why your great-uncle has arrived." Elara's blood ran cold, not with fear, but with a deep, weary annoyance. "Willem is here?" "He is in the library. He requested your presence." The manor's library was a room that predated the United States. Its walls were 2-foot-thick stone, lined with vellum-bound books, original deeds from the 1600s, and the private ledgers of dead kings. Willem van der Meer was a man of 80, but he looked carved from the same granite as the mountains. He sat by the fire, a small glass of whiskey in his hand. He did not get up when Elara entered. "Elara," he said. His voice was a dry rustle. "Uncle Willem, you should have called." "I am here," he said, as if that explained everything. "You have been busy." "I had a life to reclaim," she said, standing opposite the fireplace. She would not sit. She would not be made to feel like a child in this room ever again. "You had a mess to clean," Willem countered, his eyes sharp. "A mess of your own making. We gave you the rules, Elara. Anonymitas est potestas. You broke it. You fell in love with a builder, a loud, vulgar peacock. You let him put his name on you. I was in love, Elara said, her voice dropping. A state you and my father always treated as a liability. It is a liability, Willem snapped, striking the arm of his chair. Look what it brought. Courtrooms, headlines, psychiatrists. You were nearly erased by a common thief because you wanted to play house. I handled it, Elara said, her voice like ice. Handled it? You handled it by taking a match to the veil. You used the trust as a weapon in a public divorce. And then, he gestured angrily, you go to London and buy a forest, a public auction. Do you know what you've done? I saved a forest, and I secured my freedom. You have painted a target, girl. Willem rose to his feet, his patrician face flushed with anger. For 150 years, this family has operated from the shadows. We moved capital, we influenced markets, we funded nations, and no one saw the hand on the lever. You have just shown them the arm. What are you talking about? Julian is in prison. The world has moved on. Willem walked closer to her, his eyes narrowed. Julian Thorne was a mosquito. I'm not talking about the media. They are fools, they forget. I'm talking about them, the ones who remember. A new kind of silence filled the room, older and more dangerous than the quiet of the mountains. You know our history, Willem said, more quietly now. You know that the VDM, trust, was not the only one. In the 1800s, we were not alone. Elara knew the stories. They were told as cautionary tales to Vandermeer children. The De Vries family. The De Vries family, Willem confirmed, his voice grim. They were like us. Dutch capital. Old money. But they were reckless. They believed in force, not influence. They tried to corner the South African diamond market. Your great-great-grandfather, Art Vandermeer, saw their folly. He saw the bubble. He did not just let it burst. He pushed. He bankrupted them, Elara said. He annihilated them, Willem corrected. Drove them into ruin. He made an example of them. The De Vries name became a synonym for failure. They vanished. Their assets were absorbed. Their children scattered. That was 150 years ago, Willem. Money remembers, Elara, and a grudge like that does not die. It sleeps. He walked to a globe in the corner, spinning it slowly. They have spent a century in the dark, rebuilding, waiting. They operate under a dozen different names, in shell corporations so deep even we have trouble tracking them. But they have one goal, to reclaim their name and to destroy the family that took it from them. And they've been waiting for what? An opportunity? They've been waiting for a target, Willem said, stopping the globe with his hand. They could never find us. We were a ghost, a rumor in the halls of finance. But you, Elara, you, in your quest for personal justice, you signed your name. Elara Vandermeer. You put a face to the ghost. That name, in that New York docket, was a flare in the dark. Your bid in London was the confirmation. The eagle has landed. Elara finally understood. The mockery in the courtroom wasn't the end of a war. It was the beginning of one. She had fought a battle against a single, arrogant man, and in winning, had declared war on an empire. What do they want? Elara asked. What do you think? Revenge? They don't want to buy us. They want to bury us. They want to do to us what art did to them, and they will start with you. You are the public face, the one who broke the rule. They will try to prove you are what Julian Thorne claimed you were. Incompetent? Elara laughed, a cold, sharp sound. He tried that. No, Willem said, his eyes locking on hers. Not incompetent, reckless, a danger to the family. They will come at you not with lawyers, but with whispers. They will try to poison the board. They will try to turn our own allies, our own banks, against you. They will try to engineer a coup. They will try to put me, or someone like me, in charge. Elara looked at her great-uncle. She saw the anger, but beneath it, she saw the real reason he was here. He was afraid, not for her, but of what she had invited. She walked to the vast, ornate desk that had been Art Vandermeer's. She rested her hands on the polished wood. "For 12 years," she said, her voice resonating with a new, hard-won clarity. "I lived as a ghost, a little sparrow. I was invisible, and I was nearly destroyed. I will not go back into the shadows, Uncle. This is not a game, Elara. This is survival. This is my trust," she said, the words cutting through his panic. "My name. My legacy. Julian Thorne taught me what happens when you underestimate your opponent. It is a lesson I will not forget. You and the De Vries family seem to be making the same mistake." She turned to face him. The transformation was complete. She was not the botanist. She was not the victim. She was the 7th-generation primary beneficiary, and she was done playing small. "You came here, Willem, to see if I was a liability, to see if the little girl who ran off to play house was going to cost us everything. Now you have your answer." "And what answer is that?" he asked, wary. "You tell the De Vries family. You tell anyone who is listening that the ghost they are chasing is gone. I am Elara Vandermeer, and I am right here." She placed her palm flat on the desk. "Let them come. I've been underestimated before. It did not end well for the man who tried it." The story of Elara Vandermeer is a powerful reminder that the loudest person in the room is almost never the most powerful. They mocked her for her silence, unaware that silence is the language of true power. They mistook her simplicity for weakness, forgetting that the deepest roots grow in the quietest soil. Her victory wasn't just in the courtroom, it was in remaining true to herself, even when the world tried to tell her she was crazy. What did you think of Elara's final, devastating move? Do you think Julian ever truly loved her, or was she always just a prize he didn't understand? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and a checkmate moment that no one saw coming, please like this video and share it with someone who appreciates a story where the humble finally prevail. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss the next story.